Everyone's got to have one. Don't want to miss out.
Okay. I don't want to get. Oh, go ahead, David. I don't want to get too tangential here. We're going in a completely different direction.
Well, we're discussing Alan Moore, so I don't know if it's a completely different direction.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Good point.
So, Swamp Thing. It'd be interesting to hear what anybody has to say. I'm always wondering if I should do a brief presentation, but does anybody have any initial comments of what they read?
Do the presentation. You love to do them, don't you?
Well, I can. I mean, I usually do, and I expect I will. But I want to find out, does anybody have any initial reactions to the book that you read?
I thought it was a pretty easy sort of a read, although I'm a bit confused about some sequences in it. Some seem to be sort of dream sequences, and it was a bit hard with Swamp Thing to work out what was the real and what was the dream.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we can go through it. We'll go through it as we go.
I think. I was going to say, I think for me, sort of, I don't know where this ties in, but almost that just profound feeling of loneliness, like being disconnected from the world, you know, like I imagine the Swamp Thing not being able to breathe. It kind of ties in with COVID so nicely in that, do we exist? You know what I mean? Do we exist or do we not exist? Are we different or are we the same? Like it's kind of hard on my head a little bit, you know, because it just really related to what I was going through, you know?
Is that right? Well, you never know. Yeah, but I think that's the power of art. The power of good art. It resonates in completely unexpected ways like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I won't give a full presentation because I don't think that's needed, but I'll give a little tiny presentation. Well, Alan Moore, of course, is a British writer. He began writing for the British comics industry, and this was his first job for the American comics industry. DC Comics brought him over and had him write a number of titles. This was the first, Swamp Thing. Now, I think the reason this is so significant, for me anyway, is because it just, well, for comics, I've said this before, you've heard me say this before, comics have always, in the large part of the 20th century, in North America anyway, have had the reputation of being trash, junk for kids. It's just, you know, kids stuff. It's just subliterate stuff for intellectual deficients. and the reason comics had that reputation is because, for the most part, it was correct. For the most part, I mean, it was a deserved reputation. So there came a point where the artwork actually did improve. Around about the 70s, you know, people started coming in with actual artistic chops, and we don't have to get into that. But the writing never seemed to match up. It was always this low pulp adventure, pulp stuff. You know, it was just, you know, children's adventure stories, basically. So I think the reason Alan Moore made such a huge splash that he did when Swamp Thing first started appearing, and he took over, he didn't start the book, but when he took over the comic at issue 2021, it made a huge splash because here was a guy who was taking literary values and injecting them into comic book scripting. He was taking values like themes and resonance and metaphor and a delicious prose style, just a beautiful prose writing style, and just things that you had just never seen before in comics. Not to that extent, anyway. I mean, you got various scripts that were of various better or worse quality, varying quality, but it never seemed to take the values and the approach and the sensibility of a novelist, of a prose novelist and a short story writer, and put them into comics form. And it just kind of was astounding, and it certainly was for me at the time. And it was for everybody else to realize that, oh, this is something you could do in the comics form. This is something you could do. And for better or for worse, this is the comic that really did start us off in this whole idea that, yeah, you could put literary adult values into comics. and brought us to where we are today. Not to say that, you know, the Undergrounds, and we did Will Eisner before, and we've done, you know, other things like the EC comics before in the 50s that did that as well. But this was mainstream. Okay, that was the difference. And this took it to a new level. So for that, this was a very historic book. This really deserves its place, and it just won a whole bunch of awards, and it certainly made Alan Moore's reputation. About 2 years later, you know, he started with Watchmen, and of course, you know, the rest is history. So let's do it. Let's see if we can go through this and see what we can see here. Here we go. Okay, now see, I would just like to start off, and I'll just read the first panel. It's raining in Washington tonight. Plump, warm summer rain that covers the sidewalks with leopard spots. Downtown, elderly ladies carry their houseplants out to set them on the fire escapes, as if they were infirm relatives or boy kings. I mean, for me, it's just like at the very beginning, at the very outset, he's just throwing down the gauntlet. He's saying, you think you've read comics up to this point. Let me show you something. Let me show you something that I don't think you've seen before. Maybe something that you haven't encountered in comics before. He instantly sets a mood, sets a tone, sets an atmosphere. And this is ostensibly intended to be a horror comic. And he immediately just gets into it. If you were going to do a horror comic that was genuinely disturbing and creepy and genuinely scary, how would you do it? How could you approach it?
Well, he's creating the ominous atmosphere with the rainy night.
Yeah. So,
but I think too, he's also, and I don't want to talk too much here, but it's almost like he's setting up the stage for warmth, like plump rain, warm rain. Like it almost starts off with a tone of warmth, but then when he goes into infirm relatives and boy kings, he sort of shifts to the, not the sister.
Yeah.
Two simple paragraphs, he can do two completely different things, and it kind of puts your brain in a, not in an uneasy mode, but it already starts a really unique contrast. And then, you know, as we go through the next frames, you can see the flip, right? So it's almost a blending of sensations, like mental imagery or something. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I think so. The thing that strikes me about Alan Moore, and I've often said, you know, I mean, he has a great many gifts to him in terms of his craft, in terms of his how he approaches structure, plotting, and characterization. He has all the gifts of a great writer. But for me, I think, I mean, one of the top reasons I love reading Alan Moore is just his delicious prose style. I mean, it's like anything. It's like art it's like music. You either dig it or you don't. It's either going to hit you, it's going to hit a gong with you, or it won't. You know, there's no reason to read someone who has a beautiful prose style if they don't give you a good story, if they don't give you a reason to connect with the storyline or the characters or the narrative. Of course, it doesn't mean anything if you don't have a good plot, of course. But, you know, he does all that. Plus, I think he has a deliciously beautiful prose style. He just has an ability to write what I think are beautiful sentences, just beautiful metaphors. And that counts for a lot for me. I know it doesn't count for a lot for most other people, but it does for me anyway. I just love to drown in the play of his words. He certainly has a mastery of the language. Is just, to me, just beautiful to read. It's just luxurious.
Hey, can we scroll up for a moment?
Go up? Did you say go up?
Yeah.
Like that?
like to the cover.
There.
Higher.
All the way to the cover? To the cover.
I mean, one of the things that I thought of when I was reading this is it reminded me of before they put all the censorship on comics, going back to Creepshow.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
That was my first instinct was, okay, it's like he's going back to before they, from my point of view, really tried to ruin comics, saying that people can't handle this and so on and so forth, and all the censorship. And he's like, let's take a look at what it was like before. And that was one of the things that really drew me to Swamp Thing.
There's something to that. Yeah. I mean, clearly he's a good scholar and he knows the history of comics, and certainly he's aware of the EC comics, and we did the war comics just back in November. But they're mainly known for their horror comics, Tales from the Crypt and the Balls of Terror, I think it was Balls of Horror. And yeah, those horror comics, of course, were all done, and they caused the whole controversy in the 50s, of course, and which led to the Comics Code Authority.
Also, I believe Swamp Thing was the first comic to be released that didn't have the Comics Code Authority sticker. Like this issue does, but eventually it was printed without it, and with instead a sign saying suggested for mature readers. And I believe this was the first, certainly the first by like either like, you know, two main imprints, whatever. DC.
You have it right. You're right about that. What happened was eventually in the issues to come, I think like around 30 or 29 or something like that, the Comics Code objected to the content, and they pulled the Comics Code Authority of a stamp, and they said, we're not going to approve this. And DC, rather than carping, they went ahead and just printed it without the code. So that did happen, and yeah, I got into a couple of news stories at the time. Oh wow, this is something that's different. It's adult, and it's not intended for children. Obviously, it couldn't be approved for children. So you are right about that. That is something that happened, but it's not actually the first mainstream.
What was the first?
There were a number.
There was Stan Lee, but I mean the first series.
The first ongoing series, that might be true, yeah, because it didn't come back. But I'm thinking of, there was about a 3-issue storyline in The Amazing Spider-Man that involved drug use, and they pulled the code of approval off of those issues. And Marvel, rather than backing down, just went ahead and printed them without the code. So I think either those were the first, or I think the other one would be a DC comic that was also similarly themed.
Bucky is a junkie.
Yeah, that's the right one. That's right. So those were not approved, but you're right in that eventually when those storylines ended, the code came back. This was a series where the entire series lost the code approval and did not come back. So this would be the first one of that. And again, we're talking about mainstream Marvel DC comics, of course. Independent comics and underground comics, of course, did not go through the code to begin with, since they weren't on newsstands at the time. So,
I do want to say on the first page, this the whole the panel layout sort of mimicking a window pane, and how like immediately we're getting not only the stylistic textual prose innovation, but we're also getting the innovation in the comic book visual form.
That's right.
Of the panels, and it's almost a sort of cinematic thing as well. But I just really enjoy the whole like design looking like a window pane where he's looking out the window, but then there's also this other shot of the guy dying.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, there's a lot of experimental approaches going on here, and they do it immediately. And this kind of reminds me of Will Eisner. We covered Eisner about a month or so ago with Contract with God, and a little bit of the spirit. But yeah, there's experimental approach, this avant-garde, playing with the form, trying something new, untried, and yeah, you can see that right off the bat. Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, go ahead.
I think too, it also has kind of a cool retro feel. You know what I mean? Everything's flowy and very linear. It's almost like if somehow Star Trek or one of the great sci-fis were into a comic. It's just the line work I think is really unique. And like even in this page, the boxes aren't linear or straight. He's got the sort of the bottom of the triangle and then the eyes. It's really neat how it's how it's just seen together. And it's got a really cool, like in my mind, like a neat retro feel, but timeless as well.
Yeah. They're just trying to shake things up and show you something that you haven't seen before. And good for them. I think that's one of the reasons I read comics.
On the second page, we have sort of this main panel layout sort of stretching into the sky, almost sort of like a skyscraper in the background.
Yeah. If you're an artist, and I know there's at least one person here present who is an artist. If you're an artist, you can learn a lot from this kind of experimentalism. You can see different things you can try. Think outside the box, as they say. Sure. So, we could just go through like bit by bit like this, and it would take us forever. And that's always the problem. But, one thing I want to point out is I have seen this alleged on various, forums, where people say that the kids today can't read these old comics because they read them and there's too many words and they just don't have the patience. They don't have the concentration. To me, I think that's a shame if so. But to me, this is something I've noticed when I read a lot of modern day comics that have come out like in the last 20 years. They just seem to they just seem so light. They seem so light. This one seems so grounded. And comics like this, they just seem, it's just words and words and words. But nevertheless, you're compelled. You're compelled to go into this story and you're taking it in, at least to me. And I hope that's not a generational problem. I hope not, because I hope we can still appreciate the slowness of this. He's building up to a mood and an atmosphere, and it's patient. You're going to have to take your time. Yeah, I do read modern comics, and they just seem to move along very rapidly at a rapid clip, but they just seem so very light and very superficial. And, there's not enough depth. Where here you could see there's a foundation. There's some place you can stand, and that takes some patience to have that established. But that's the power of a good, well-told story.
Yeah, I would say that kids are capable of reading a lot of words, and Harry Potter proved that. I really can't think of any generation that did like its children. It seems like with every generation, they're saying our kids are so stupid, our kids are so impatient.
Yeah.
And
it's true.
A lot of readers.
It's true. They are getting more stupid.
I was thinking, like when I was reading comics back in the 80s, it seemed like I had some pretty full stories. And then I noticed when I stopped reading comics for years and years in the 90s, it was because I'd get a comic, I'd read it in like a few minutes, and then it's like, and continue on to buy the next one. And I was just like, number one, I can't afford it if they're going to write comics like this. And number two, it's like they're not even trying. They're just like, it's Wolverine. You'll like him no matter what we do with him. So we'll take his adamantium steel skeleton away, and he doesn't have a healing factor, and then we'll turn him to a monster. And it was just like, they're not trying. And then a lot of times it just seems to me when they aren't trying and people are complaining you're not trying, they just immediately say, well, this is what the kids want because they're dumb. And they just move on along with that until somebody, again, like the Harry Potter series comes out, and here are these big 500-page books and kids are just reading straight through them. Why? Because they're good stories.
Sure. Yeah, I really hope we don't get to a point where we can't acknowledge the great works of the past. Okay, so I don't want to like spend like every single page here because we got a lot to cover. I just want to get the highlights. Now,
what was the trick with Woodrue there? He was rejected by his humanity in a sense. He felt rejected, didn't he? So he decided to identify with the green.
Right. Yeah. He I mean yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, he's another one of the plant mutates. He turned into a plant himself. He originally a human, but went a different direction.
There was no meat left in him.
I think that was the case. Yeah. I don't remember his origin actually, but so I do want to point out this one where every single page at the bottom is underscored by the Swamp Thing's corpse, and as he slowly regenerates himself, bit by bit. And here we get a quick recap of Swamp Thing's origin for those who didn't know. And what, yeah, you get all these Dutch angles with the artwork because like these things are twisting the narrative, a twist that you didn't expect, a sudden unexpected lurch, and then the artwork mirrors that because this is contextualizing everything that we knew about Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing was created in 1971-ish or so. And so that his comic had been going for whatever, 10 years by that point. And, the whole concept of the book was, this is Alec Holland, the man who wants to find the cure for him being the Swamp Thing. He would like to go back to being a human man again, and stop being the Swamp Thing. So that was the whole premise of the comic, of his adventures. And now we find out that whole thing was completely a lie to begin with. So that upturns the entire premise of the comic. And you can see that mirrored in the artwork. It's suddenly everything that we knew, that we counted on, is completely overturned and upside down. And now, and you get this jolting vertigo, lurching of your expectations and your perspectives going in a different direction. And the artwork kind of does mirror that when it's leaning and doing all these, diagonals and okay. And this is not the artwork that you would see in a Superman comic. Definitely not. It's very, very raw and messy and visceral, like nature. And you get a sense. I mean, even though you're dealing with a human-shaped plant, you get the sense of that kind of a David Cronenberg body horror, where the body is mutating and shape-shifting into different configurations, and that kind of horror of that visceral disorienting feeling of your body acting in ways you're not expecting. And then we get this very, very effective presentation of the newly grown, the newly regenerated Swamp Thing. And you have to, the thing about it is in the comics, of course, you have to use your imagination to move. It's just you're looking at still pictures, but to me, I just think this is so very, very well animated. As I'll say, it's just a well animated sequence where you at every point you see the beat of the fight or the pursuit, beat by beat, and it's just relentless. Where he smashes the desk. Well, first he screams, then he smashes, then he throws the desk, and the the guy runs, and then he smashes through the door. I think it's entirely effective. It's just it really puts you in the scene in a way that you don't expect just a reading experience to do. But yes, it's very cinematic. I mean, it's engrossing, and that's a good trick. That's the sign of a good comics creators who can do that.
I really like the part where he says, "I wonder how he will take it."
Yeah. I wonder how the old man will take it when the doors won't open. Yeah, if he did the job right, you really feel that. You can feel that sudden spike in your heart when, oh no, it's not going to get away. And you should be able to feel that sudden spike of fear. And then he just, yeah. And you see this in the angles, in the angled shards of the panels. Yeah, very effective. And this was his first issue. It wasn't really, but effectively, it was emotionally, it was his first issue. And then, yeah, we end with a book note as we began. It's raining in Washington tonight. I mean, for goodness sake, that just would really, lay down the gauntlet and said, whoa, this is something new that you haven't seen before. This is a new way of approaching a comic book when this was published all the way back in 1982. I think. I certainly do.
So you mean all the Swamp Things have been the same author, have they?
Well, Alan Moore started at issue 20. We'll ignore that, but 21 really, and then he wrote all the way up to 64-ish, which was only about 4 years or thereabouts. But he made his mark on comics with that, and Swamp Thing still continues to this day. But so, any comments, or we can go on to the next one? Let me see.
I used to read Swamp Thing a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
I like the comic, but which episode are we talking about here?
Moronic Man Saga.
But which number? Is it like 10 years later or something? Oh, number 22, March 84. You say it started 1971? But here's the 22nd episode, March 84.
This is Saga of Swamp Thing.
You would have to go into the details of the whole. It's like trying to follow Futurama or The Simpsons. You just go to the Wikipedia. It'll give you the list of the full, when they were published, if you want to. Yeah.
Well, broadly, I believe there was a Swamp Thing series, and then there was a second series, which was Saga of the Swamp Thing, which Alan Moore took over in issue 20.
With issue 20, yeah, and I think it started with I think Marty Pasco or somebody like that, but and there's still Swamp Thing comics published today. But the thing about Marvel and DC is they're always rebooting. They're always starting the thing over. Every comic gets started over. I mean, for goodness sake, if you look at the current Fantastic Four issue. You know what number it is? It's like number 24, but that's because they've started that one like 7 times. They never just start with an issue 1 and just keep going, which would make sense. But anyway, that's a different topic. So there's just so many different things that you could point out. This next issue starts with, you just see these 2 figures approaching our vantage point. Let's call it the camera, if it were a camera. As the 2 figures approach us, the camera is locked and slowly panning over as they approach, which is reminiscent of Winsor McCay from Little Nemo, if you remember how he would do that, where you would see just every progressive panel, the action in the world has changed And so you get that even though the camera hasn't moved. I hope I explained that correctly. But that's a good comics effect. You can't get that anywhere else. You can't get that in film, not really. We've talked about this before. But anyway, the point is, and on this page, is you see the characters who are just having a conversation, talking about what they're talking about, and the camera is panning over, and you see in the foreground all the moss and lizards and weed and foliage of the swamp happening. And as you keep reading and see and following the characters as they progress through the page, and then by the end, you suddenly realize that the foreground foliage and moss and everything that we've seen and probably have been ignoring the whole time was in fact the Swamp Thing's body. And it's just you see that's that sudden shock of oh wow, you weren't expecting that. And then you see this where the rain is like pooling in the crevices of his peat moss and all of his vines, and that's just entirely effective. I mean, it just really throws you for a loop. I mean, this is the main character, and to see him like this, I mean, it's just very, very evocative, I think. And you got these frogs here that are just going about their business. Very, very visceral in impact, I think. Okay, but as I say, we can just spend hours just doing things one after the other on this, and I don't think we would want to do this. And now we get all of these dream sequences that you were talking about, Stephen.
So it's going back to a wedding.
In this, well, yeah, okay. In this particular one, yeah. So he's from a psychological viewpoint in this particular juncture in the narrative, he is psychologically processing what he has just learned, which is that his humanity, what he always considered himself to be Alec Holland at his core, and he wanted to get back to being Alec Holland and stop being the Swamp Thing. And so now he's realizing that's impossible.
He's merely a copy.
And yeah, and he's processing it. And so that this particular chapter is him figuring this out and working it out on a psychological level. Okay, and this character, of course, we first see in Alan Moore's issues. This is Abby Holland. She's been a recurring character throughout the entire series of Swamp Thing. And this is a character, her husband, Matt, who has these powers and abilities of creating letting his imagination and his ideas that he comes up with come to material form, which is an ability he got in previous issues, which we don't need to go into the details anyway.
I wanted to jump back just briefly and ask anyone to see this. At the start of this particular comic, did anyone look at it and think of like Red Riding Hood going through the forest, not fully aware of what she's going to run into?
I didn't until just now. Hey, yeah, maybe that was what was being thought of. Yeah, the innocent girl who's about to get in over her head with a monster that's beyond her ability to control. Maybe so.
Well, we've got the Green Man mythology.
Yeah, that's right. You pointed that out.
So we've got a bit of Robin Hood here, the man who retreats to the forest away from a threatening civilization.
Yeah, you pointed out the myth of the British Green Man, which we don't go into it with these chapters that we read, but if you remember Neil Gaiman did write a handful of Swamp Thing issues, and he actually does go into the British Green Man myth with Swamp Thing. He actually does. Just a little bit. I don't have it at hand, but I'll show it to you later if you're interested.
I was going to say, I think interestingly enough, too, the dream sequence as I describe it, him coming to accept his reality, that's very difficult, because I mean, that speaks to so many human issues like denial, acceptance, coming to reality, questioning your reality, you know, who am I? What am I? And I mean, that right there, that little snippet is so emotionally intense to think of what, you know, the Swamp Thing would be going through in that like mental, you know, saga.
Yeah.
And it's strange how that could be encapsulated in such a just one page. Like that's an intense amount of information to be carried in such a small amount of information.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You feel what would it do to you if you realized, yeah, everything that you thought about yourself as a self-human entity was vanished, was erased. Yeah. What would that do? And I think that's what the best philosophy will do. But certainly that is one of the main reasons we would all read Alan Moore's writing, is because he has a champion grasp of human psychology and human character. I mean, he really is a terrific writer, because he just has such a pin perfect, his fingers right on the pulse of the human psyche. I think, which a good writer really needs.
Yeah, and an understanding of the depths of. Like I like the comic and I appreciate it, but the darkness, like, and maybe it's just my mood today, but it's just there's so much darkness in it, and I don't want to get sidetracked on that. But when you look at it, like it really is a tragic story, hey?
It could be, because it's intended as a horror comic, and he said, "What if we did a horror comic that was actually disturbing?" And I really want to point this out: the thing where he's eating this part of him, the tuber. You know, if he does it right, that's supposed to be really creepy. Wait, he actually cut this part off of him, and he's just cooked it, and he's eating it, and that's supposed to be, oh wow. Okay, that's like one of those, like whatever the heck, what the Silence of the Lambs, the Hannibal Lecter, just one of those. Ooh, okay, wasn't expecting that. It's just really disturbing,
Yeah, and I think the more you take it apart and see the layers, the more you can see, like, it's almost a psychological story in print. Like, it's not a flash comic. Like, It truly is a story with multiple layers of depth. Like, it's very interesting. Wow.
Also, this is kind of skipping ahead to later Swamp Thing mythology, but I didn't notice it until I reread it. So for this time, but I think it's kind of suggested that Floronic Man, when he ate the piece of Swamp Thing, it caused him to hallucinate, because there's a hallucination sequence. I think it's at the end of this issue.
Well, the thing with Woodrow, as we get to this, and this is such a powerful sequence where he starts communing with it's called the Green, the collective energy of the planet's biosphere. Where he's communing and connecting and becoming one with it. And this is just such a powerful sequence. I think. And it's just so effective.
Hey, quick question going back where he's eating the part to become like a part of, more of the nature forest spirit. One of the things it made me think of, remember when in Greek mythology, and also Neil Gaiman covers it, the Cult of Osiris, how Osiris was pulled, not Osiris. Wait a minute, I'm getting my names messed up. Anyway, it's one of the Orpheus. And Orpheus was torn apart and eaten. A part of it was they would go into the grove and look for the god and see some creature and say, that's the god, and they would take it into them by eating it. A lot of ancient religions had that, and it just it made me think of like he's seeing the Swamp Thing almost as like an ancient god in the area, and he's having communion with it to become more of the being that he wants to be.
Well, Woodrow is certainly susceptible to jealousy, isn't he, and envy.
Dionysus, the Dionysian cults, that's what I was trying to think of.
Okay.
But dysphoria as well. He's rejected his own kind. This is very typical of the entire green movement, you know, Extinction Rebellion, where they start affecting these styles like there's some alternate type of humanity, that they are the pure, the better, against all the evil humanity, which isn't them. And eventually, almost automatically, there comes to the desire to kill the evil humanity they've disidentified with.
And I like that. And I think tied in with that too is, you know, you start off thinking he's utterly alone, but then he has this other sort of cosmic universe that he's a part of. But once again, he's still disconnected from humanity. So he's alone, but not alone. He has a desire, but he has a community. And once again, I don't know, maybe it's like I said, maybe it's just my mood today, but I just see this theme of splitting, like he's constantly being split between what he desires and what he is, what he wants and his reality, and maybe even his intentions in his life. Like it just seems like there's this theme of constantly splitting between ideas and ideals.
Or
morality and amorality.
With a rejection from the figure of the father figure of power.
Mm-hmm.
He saw his future being respected by the world, and then he felt the leadership of the world rejected him. So immediately he yanked in a different direction.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And at every point, he refuses to accept responsibility for himself.
Ah, very good point.
He's always laying the blame on, it's the evil world of meat, the humans.
Yeah, there is a bit of a, what would you say? Would that be like a self-pity?
Dysphoria.
Would that be like, dysphoria? Yeah, you're right. Because you're right, he's isolated, but he's his own worst enemy.
Of course, it's now a crime not to be dysphoric. If you identify with who you are now the evil to be exterminated.
Because why couldn't he be a hero? You know, why does he have to live this dark life? So you're right, there's a free will choice, eh? Dysphoric, you're right.
It's better to rule in hell than serve in heaven.
Yeah, I'm looking up dysphoria right now, and I think you're right on the money there with the dysphoria. You're right, he's just disillusioned and cashed out.
Well, all these, white twerps like who are in Antifa, for example, they've decided the white man is evil, but they are white men. So.
I thought the Antifa guys are supposed to be the good guys. Don't tell me I got that wrong. Come on now. Sorry, no political humor.
The Bible warns you: beware the wolf in sheep's clothing. They're everywhere and in many different forms.
Beware of anyone who's radical. Their intentions aren't good, maybe. But maybe that's another group.
I don't know if radical is a sign of badness, but beware of people that, get into that sort of extreme dichotomy.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm green power, man, or I'm with the cosmic. You other guys, you're the bad. And then they get more and more preoccupied with the bad other. They must exterminate.
Yeah, extreme right or extreme left. Anything to the extreme is unhealthy.
It's amazing. It's so widespread today. I mean, it wouldn't have been widespread so much 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It's just amazing to see how many of these dysphorias there are today. It's just that, I mean, I'm a bit of a screwball, but I sort of accept what I am in a small measure, and you just have to live with it.
Okay, right here, question. When he starts looking like this, does this make you think of Pan?
Yeah. You already mentioned it, didn't you, with the mysteries of the great god. Who was it you mentioned?
I was talking about the cult of Dionysius before.
Dionysius. Well, that was a sort of a cult of Pan.
Yeah. Well, this one just was like really Pan, and then I just start wondering if Pan was in the story, would he basically be saying the same thing? Would he be complaining about humanity just taking over nature too much?
I I don't think so. Pan was a fun guy. He was a nice guy.
Yeah, but I suspect even Pan could get ticked off to a certain point.
Maybe so, but probably not to this extent.
It would be an interesting comic, though.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, well, the
yeah.
cult of Pan was centered on some place in the Peloponnese, quite some distance from the what was the other famous oracle, the Oracle of Delphi, and that was devoted to Apollo, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this other cult, Pan, was in the Peloponnese and was very closely located with a cult devoted to lycanthropy, werewolfery.
It would be interesting to see Pan and Apollo just having a discussion here.
Well, are there any Apollo-ing sort of superheroes? I imagine there's quite a few, aren't there? Is Superman a sort of Apollo?
Sort of a sun god.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, well, what's Superman's weakness? He's so powerful, who can oppose him?
Anyone with kryptonite.
Well, yeah, that's one weakness.
Lex Luthor pretty much has a whole arsenal of kryptonite weapons.
Awesome. Yeah. Well.
In fact, it sometimes seems like between Lex Luthor and Batman, they could just rebuild Krypton.
I wonder though, and I don't know, this takes us a bit away from Swamp Thing maybe, but what about like the Achilles heel? Like, does Swamp Thing have an Achilles heel? What is that? Is there that, invincible person with one vulnerability, and does that play into it?
He doesn't get invited to social occasions by the looks of things. That could be a bit of a problem for a superhero.
Yeah, this is actually delved into later on, not to spoil it, but it turns out that Swamp Thing basically can't be killed, and yet he does in his own way. He has a weakness.
Fire. Swamp Thing.
Oh, it's not a thing. I'll give you a hint though. It has been introduced in the story already, his weakness.
Yeah, but he also needs to have access to greenery. I mean, you could blow him up with a bazooka, but around.
There's actually, even later on, there's a crazy story they do at the very end of the series called Loving the Alien. I don't even want to explain what happens in this story because it's so wild. But basically, they get into this scenario where a robot tries to turn him into a robot and he still comes back to life. Like a robot eats him and tries to turn him into a robot, but somehow he still comes back to life. So because he's like vegetation, he can always grow back to life. So yeah, just Loving the Alien.
Yeah, I always wonder because we can only do so much in a 1 week reading amount of time. So when we do a long ongoing series, you're free to read it on your own if you want. I always wonder if anybody ever does, though. We did issue 1 of Sandman, but I'm not sure anybody who hasn't already read it.
Anyway, he speaks with the original Alec when he's carrying his skull and spinal column around, or his bones around. So in
the dream, yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's kind of psychologically saying goodbye to his humanity because he realizes that that's just a burden that he was holding on to.
So do you think they're going to anytime soon have a movie where like Disney and DC work together to have Swamp Thing fight Groot?
And fight groups? I don't think that'll be happening, no.
Well, I do want to bring up one topic of discussion though. The whole thing about him, I don't know, like the journey away from his humanity or whatever. Like, what would that be like? Like a plant trying to emulate a human? Like, what is the perspective of the plant in this situation? Do you think? Like, what is it like a plant to realize it was only an imitation of a human and never human to begin with? What is going through the plant's mind? And of course, this is what they're trying to communicate in this dream sequence. But I just think like as an overall like sort of idea, like what would this be like?
That's right. Yeah. And that's part of that's one of the reasons why we like reading fantasy and science fiction, is you get the idea from a different perspective, an alien perspective, and you try to imagine what would it be like if you are a fantastical creature, an alien, and see things from a non-human perspective, which is valuable, actually. It's important to know that there are other beings and entities that exist and think differently from the way you think. And metaphorically, we can ascribe that to nations and cultures and religions.
It's also the problem of monism and dualism here. Obviously, this is preaching a dualistic perspective. Now, there is an argument that our mind or subjectivity or spirit, if it's something which actually exists separate from the body, may not itself be genuinely human. We might only be human because we inhabit a human body. So we could perhaps go somewhere else or be something else.
Yeah.
A monist would say that our spirit, whatever it is fully a product of the material, fully a product of the body. So we are this human, but
I mean, that gets into, whether you are going to go in those directions or not. I know the thing about Buddhists is not every Buddhist believes in reincarnation. There are many different types of Buddhists who believe many different types of things. But some of the types of Buddhists who actually do know reincarnation, they do say, yeah, it is an option. Once you get into, it's called the bardo, after death. When you're in the bardo, you could, if you wanted to, choose to be reincarnated on another planet as an alien. That is an option. But
well, and I wonder too, like just going in that direction, you look at the different foundations of the major religious or spiritual beliefs. You have Christianity, where we're a collective. We have a soul, we live a good life, we die, we go to heaven. Then you have the Buddhists, who my understanding is they don't necessarily believe in one God. They just believe in like a path to enlightenment, and we are to a certain extent our own God. And then it speaks to the swamp thing, because like how far down can you even be a human and go down an individual path until you become an entity other than human? Because when you remove yourself from the collective, to a certain extent, you're no longer part of the collective. Are your bits and pieces even part of humanity anymore, even though you're a human? Like, where does collectivity begin and disengagement end? Yeah. Like if you live in a mountain for the 20 years and you don't talk to anyone unless you have to, yeah, and you meditate away from all the feelings and all the life of the world, like, do you disengage? And at one point, or are we connected? I mean, I don't know where to go with that. That's just the thought that came to my mind.
Oh yeah, it's the Robinson Crusoe experience. If you're just not involved in the greater humanity, can you be called human? And many philosophers have made that point, certainly.
Or
one thing where he discovers that he's not human at all. That part just actually got destroyed in an explosion originally, and something else took over. Now, like whatever to him was kind of a seed for something else that isn't human at all. It looked memories, but he isn't.
That's right.
I don't know about this. Yeah. He has maybe the memories, but he doesn't. His origination is not. He's not human anymore.
Yeah, he's going backwards. He didn't even start from the inside and found himself out. He's from the outside trying to understand if he can be in. So you're right. It's almost double the work, because you're right. He's external but wants to be internal. So there's a big question there. No one can even make that transition.
Pinocchio, then, he wants to be a real boy.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Oh, and I got my philosophers mixed up earlier. Nietzsche and Descartes. Descartes was, I think, therefore I am. So maybe there's a bit of that play there too. Like, is he what he thinks he is, or is he what he is, or is he something different?
Are you what you think you are?
Probably.
I don't know. Some days I hope so, and some days I hope not.
Well, you mates shouldn't be so proud of yourselves.
There's a bit of dysphoria there, I think. No, it's a good question though, right? You know, who are we? You know? Yeah.
Well, you know, I think part of the idea is, you know, plants and animals, including humans, all have like the common element of life. And so we're sort of left with like the barest notion of, you know, being a person, I guess if you want to call Swamp Thing a person, of just he's alive, he has a body, and he's conscious, I guess. So that's his commonality with humanity.
Well, you're right, because the bits and pieces are there. You know, he's alive, he's conscious, he has a form that's somewhat human. You know what I mean? He has obviously emotions. So yeah, like how close is he from not being human? If you take out the physical structure in his inner content or his inner context, is he human?
Well, he's a plant.
Well, fair. But is he, you know, human enough to identify as human or even potentially be identified as a human by someone? Almost like the king, not King Kong. I don't know, what am I trying to say here? I don't know. You know, could he have enough of human characteristics to be considered human, even though he's not human, even though he's a plant?
Swamp Thing also might be asking who's the one that has the authority to say what's a plant and what's a human in the first place.
Oh, I like that. That's right. Who has the authority to say, right? Who can judge anyone but God if you know, if you want to go that route.
These themes are elaborated further on in the series.
I guess we're getting
Wow.
into AI and stuff, are we? If it thinks it's human, it's really human?
Yeah, you think therefore you are, or I think therefore I am? I don't know.
Well, I mean, we're almost talking about AI, aren't we?
Well, yeah, that's right. The robot has human feelings, emotions, characteristics, memories. Then is it human?
Well, what if there was like a robot that was trying to create a copy of you, and the robot imitated you, and even if it was indistinguishable, wouldn't you feel like that robot is not you?
Oh man, I'm checking out. This is too much for me. I need a break. It's a good question, though. It's very relevant.
Yeah.
Isn't that one of the benefits of art? It creates, engenders this kind of conversation, this kind of depth.
It gives us empathy for characters so far away from humans.
But then maybe also ties that empathy back to ourselves and our individual settings, because you know it can make us reflect on ourselves, right? What the Swamp Thing goes through is so reflective of maybe what someone else is going through or what we felt in our lives or are feeling or could feel. Like it's very, and maybe that's the connection. I think you're right, David. Art can not only connect us to the outside world, but maybe good art can also connect us to our inside world, or maybe both at the same time.
You get to see a new way of thinking, a new way of seeing, a new way of perceiving, a new way of understanding yourself and culture and nature and the world. And that's why we participate in art, is to get that new vantage point, to see the world differently, and thus expand our own horizons, expand our own dimensions.
Our internal awareness.
And the best art does that. And the best art questions, ourselves and our nature and our concept of who we are. And I think this is if you did go on and read the entirety of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, you'd be well, first you'd be really very entertained. It's very well done, and you would find a lot of these deep philosophical questions asked. And yeah, this is a great series, and I would like to recommend that everybody read it. I know no one. we all have limited time. I know that, but this is worthwhile reading.
It's a neat series, but does it stay on such a dark path? Like, does it lighten, or is it just kind of a? Because I could imagine, like, I enjoy it and I enjoy talking about it, but I think if I had to immerse myself in it, I wonder. Going back to the dysphoria, I wonder, does it get lighter or does it stay dark?
I would say it's still very dark, but it also gets very romantic.
Maybe something for the summer or post-COVID summer, you know, when there's sunshine and light and heat, not cold and isolation.
Yeah, this is truly one of the great comics of all time, I think, and really should be read. But it's Alan Moore, so you know he's going to be good.
Excellent.
Well, unfortunately, it will be good to us, but as I often say, kind of depressed. If it sells very well, then it's probably not something I'm going to be big into. And I could show people, look how great Alan Moore is, and they're like, what?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not going to read a comic that looks like it was written in the 80s. It's deep. I need something that's going to have flash and bang and, you know, be able to be done in 10 minutes. I don't want to think.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier. I mean, I hope we never get to a point where we can't appreciate Alan Moore's writing, and I think there's a substantialness, there's a solidity to those older comics that I just find a bit lacking in today's modern comics. I just read them, and they just seem very lightweight. They don't seem, you know, it's like scene to scene to scene, okay, but I don't feel involved, and I don't feel there's any, you know, foundation established to me anyway. I know it's an opinion, but you know, other people like it, like modern comics just fine. But to me, there seems to be a dimension that's lacking. It's kind of like, if you know who Frank Zappa is, anybody here know Frank Zappa?
Yeah.
You know, the thing about Frank Zappa, if you listen to his music, it is what it is. But his son once gave an interview, and he said he grew up listening to his father's, Frank Zappa's, music. And when he listened to turn around the radio and he turned on pop music on the radio, you know, the first thing he said was, he said, this sounds like half of the orchestration. Like, where's the rest of it? I mean, where's the rest? I mean, it sounds so very small and minuscule, and you're getting like a quarter of what there should be. Where's the rest of the notes? Where's the rest of the instruments? Where's the rest of the orchestration? You know, it's like pop music is just so insubstantial when you compare it to something that's more sophisticated and more depth and more richness. And that's kind of what I feel about, you know, when I read Alan Moore compared to, you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Well, I think even if you go to cinema, television, movies, like it seems like when they started coming up with digital animation, acting took a back step. And the further you go back in time, the more acting was the forefront, and the more like the nonverbals and the presentation. So yeah, it seems like the more you add flash, the more it gets taken away from the depth. And I think the beautiful thing about the Swamp Thing comic, at least this one I've seen, is that the art is unique, but the color, the contrast, the simplicity sort of reflected in the depth of the story makes the art seem even more complex. And I just don't think you would get that with modern animation, modern print, modern colors. You know, it almost is that story over form. And I think you see that through all different types of art.
Yeah. I know I see much more impressive animation in shorts than in full-length features. I see more experimental approaches in shorts than in Pixar or Disney. They're willing to try new things, but yeah, that's part of the problem, isn't it, Victor? Because that you're not going to sell a lot of tickets to experimental stuff. So, I mean, it's yeah, that merging between commerce and art. If you try something new, yeah, it's not going to get very far, but
I am optimistic enough that I do believe there will always be a group of people that will want this. It might not be the majority, but I mean, the stories that live on, the art styles, the ideas, the psychology that you find in a story, there will always be a group of people that will want that. And that's the optimistic part that I have.
Yeah. I mean, Alan Moore still has a great reputation right at the moment, and people will still count this as one of the all-time greats, and I hope that continues for at least for my lifetime. Afterwards, I don't care anymore. But I hope in my lifetime, Alan Moore doesn't lose his reputation.
Well, so the Swamp Thing looks a bit like a golem.
Maybe, yeah.
It's sort of a giant build, you know. So it's not something that, again, it limits him in society. You know, people will fear the massive build.
Yeah, I think he's kind of like a harvest god, like a harvest fertility symbol, really, like the fertility symbols of nature in the ancient Mithraic cults. Yeah, he's like to ensure a foundation, a rich harvest for the season.
Oh, yeah, there's the most famous of the Arthurian stories was Gawain and the Green Knight, where the Green Knight, you can chop his head off and, well, he's still going.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, Swamp Thing is kind of like a fertility symbol. He is the symbol of the power of nature and the dominance of nature.
So now are you thinking of Sean Connery playing Swamp Thing?
That might have been something.
Oh, that would have been fantastic. I could see that working for sure with the accent and the voice.
That might have worked.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the movie where Sean Connery played the Green Knight, and I forgot what the name of the movie was, but it was the Sir Gawain movie, and Sean Connery was the Green Knight. This was maybe back in the 70s or something like that. So when you brought that up, I just immediately imagined.
He was the Green Knight. No, I can't recall that one. Sean Connery in an Arthurian film, that does ring a bell, actually. I think he was playing the part of King Arthur in one film, wasn't he?
He did that later. That was the one with the guy from An Officer and a Gentleman. Here it is, Sword of the Valiant. That's what it was.
Right. Well, it looks like a good movie.
It was.
And we didn't get into the last issue. I just want to mention it just to quickly mention when the Justice League show up, it seems to me to take a very different approach to how you normally see the Justice League. I could pull it up if you want. I don't know if we need to, but I just wanted to point out that it's just such a very poetic approach to displaying and presenting, what are basically corporate children's superhero characters of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, and to see them with a touch of grandeur and poetry and resonance, which I don't think you'd ever seen that before. So I just thought that was particularly resonant. I think it gives you a different view of, what would it be like if these incredibly super powerful beings existed, and it just gives you a different way of viewing it. And you said, oh wow, I never saw it from that angle before, and there's value to that.
Yeah, it kind of like took me out of the story though, because it's like I'm really into Swamp Thing, I'm reading this different genre, and all of a sudden here's Hawkman, and I'm like, I don't want to read about Hawkman. I don't care about Hawkman. I like it better if you're like reading Swamp Thing and then like Constantine or somebody like that shows up. But it just kind of pulled me out of it.
Well, yeah, sure, it might, but it's always the problem with when you're doing something in this shared continuum, because you realize, well, okay, if they have this over here and this, like with the Marvel movies, if they have this technology in this Marvel movie, then why didn't they use it here? And this, so on and so on, and it starts breaking down from the illogic of it all. How could this happen if this over here? And then it's just about traffic management rather than telling a good story. But that's unavoidable, I think, if you're going to be in a shared continuum. But I think they all fall into the same problem. Star Wars, Star Trek, all of them, they never escape those problems.
Well, that was a period of revival in the movie scene. Star Wars was the revival period. The movies really flagged out in the 70s. By the mid-70s, are really just flapping in the wind. The whole movie scene. A lot of the movies were really weak, and then the new strong theme comes out. But really, I don't think we've really seen anything new since then. You know, since the 70s or the 80s, they've just been repeating the same themes.
We watched Get Out just 2 days ago in the movie watching group. We watched.
Oh yeah, I looked that up to see what it was about. So yeah, they're somehow they're swapping bodies or something like that, looking for new candidates. So
that was
the guy's been teased along by this girl that's done it before.
I think it's good enough that you could count it as something, a new approach. It came out in 2017, just a couple years ago.
What was that called?
It's called Get Out. We watched it just 2 days ago. Yeah, I would count that as a new approach to the horror genre. I'm not a big horror guy, really.
My main problem with horror is that I'm usually more interested in the backstory than in the actual horror story. I mean, the example I always use is Friday the 13th, Part 4, when you've got the one guy, he's like his girlfriend just dumped him and he's meeting someone new at the camp. And then you've got the little boy who's into doing special effects. And I'm like really into that. And then Jason shows up and starts killing people. I'm like, I didn't want Jason to kill people. I wanted to learn more about these characters. I was enjoying the movie a lot more before Freddy showed up. So
I haven't seen it, but there's a movie called Cabin in the Woods, which I understand it's supposed to be. I haven't seen it. I should probably watch it. It's supposed to be an examination of the whole idea behind the horror genre, right?
Yeah, Cabin in the Woods I would put in sort of the same category as Scream 1, because it's like Scream 1 is basically Wes Craven making fun of his own movies. And Cabin in the Woods is basically a semi-comedic version of Friday the 13th and the guy with the chainsaw on his hand, which is funny because the guy with the chainsaw on his hand, Evil Dead. The Evil Dead movies were kind of spoofs in and of themselves.
Yeah.
Cabin in the Woods, I can say that was a really good movie.
I wonder if it would be worthwhile watching the Evil Dead movies. I mean, they're just horrifically horrible, but at the same time, there's lots of depth in there.
Yeah, the Evil Dead movies to me are sort of like movies where they weren't taking it too seriously. They were being a bit camp and they just ran with it and somehow it worked. Sort of like Deathstalker 2. Deathstalker 2, people have compared that to Evil Dead 2, where they're saying the main character in Deathstalker 2, he knows he's in a bad movie, so he's having fun with it. And somehow it's like the most, to me, it's like the most hilarious sword and sorcery movie I've ever seen.
Watching your link, Rob, it's really very nice style.
Oh yeah, In Shadow. Yeah, it's an interesting style. I've seen some other animated films that are in the same sort of style. I'm not sure if they're by the same person.
Yeah, there are good shorts out there on YouTube and everywhere, but you have to find them. And I think there's a lot of imagination there. And I would love to see greater appreciation for those kinds of shorts. But I mean, those kinds of style animation. But it's very hard to get a lot of support for experimental stuff. So yeah, I mean, sooner or later we're going to do a lot more Alan Moore stuff. Sooner or later we'll do Promethea, and he's written so much, but Alan Moore is an author worth reading. He does everything you want a writer to do.
The earlier Swamp Things, which I haven't looked at. So what the basic theme is, the swamp man's just wandering around and he's hitting the wrong people or something like that, and they're giving him a hard time, or
Yeah.
The original.
Sorry?
Lost most of his memory, I think, and he was trying to find out more about who he was and recover some of his humanity. I don't know what to say.
But it's sort of, for the humans, just a big dork. That was his problem. He was standing up there like a bit of an oversized sort of mountain figure. Is that the theme that sort of, in the end, the world's just attacking him? Is that the theme of the original set of comics?
Like a Frankenstein.
Yeah, Frankensteinian figure, yeah. So the world's projecting onto him. Now, as far as I can figure out, the Swamp Thing wasn't really a threat to anybody in the earlier comics, was he? He wasn't going out of his way to harm anybody or anything like that. He was just wandering around, and the world kept on picking on him. Is that the theme that was in the early comics?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not like I read them, but yeah, it's my understanding. Yeah, they were just basically these 1970s horror stories.
The Swamp Thing's problem was he was a Swamp Thing, and that was the world's problem with him.
Yeah.
If they had left him alone, basically, there wasn't much of a problem. It's just when he crossed paths with the normal world, there's going to be trouble.
Yeah, right.
Sort of reminds me of like the old 1960s version stories of the Incredible Hulk. Because the Incredible Hulk on a regular basis would be wandering around in the woods just trying to get people to leave him alone.
Yeah.
And I mean, Peter David's Hulk is still my favorite, but it did remind me of the 1960s stories of the Hulk.
I did want to bring up, if we're talking about Alan Moore, I did want to bring up just maybe as a topic of future discussion or something, but Miracle Man was the series that Alan Moore did before he did Swamp Thing, and it took a while to come out in the U.S., but that one was really good as well, and it was, I think it was honestly maybe the first Alan Moore series ever, aside from his like shorter works in like I guess 2000 AD, I want to say, but
no, Warrior.
What?
No. Well, in the UK, it was titled Marvel Man, right. But those stories were printed in the magazine Warrior, which was printed alongside V for Vendetta.
Oh, I see.
So basically, Marvel Man and V for Vendetta were published simultaneously in the pages of Warrior magazine. But even by that point, he had been writing for 2000 AD for some time before even that started. So I mean, I think he'd written Skiz, he'd written Halo Jones. So those were, I think, the series that he'd started in 2000 AD before. Warrior started with V for Vendetta and Marvel Man.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just a Marvel Man fan.
Yeah.
He did his
own comic strip once too. What?
I said I was once a Marvel Man.
Oh, right. And he also did his own comic strip where he actually did the cartooning. He actually cartooned and did the scripting. He did, which I haven't read, but I know he did that for a while.
I want to be a Marlboro Man. So the Marvel Man.
And he's written a few novels too. I've read one of them. He's written another one I haven't read. But
Question.
Like books without pictures.
Question. Do you feel that the genre of a hero who doesn't entirely remember his past and is always discovering things, is that really still going on much? Because I remember like in the early years, like the Chris Claremont 1980 Wolverines, where a part of Wolverine's character was you didn't know everything about his past. And every now and then he come across a character and he's like, oh, it's so-and-so. I remember we used to do such and such a thing together, but they never went into detail. Yeah. And it's like, I always liked that. I always thought it kind of messed things up if they gave you, and here's the whole entire backstory and explanation of this character. I liked having a little bit of mystery to the character. And I mean, do you feel like that they just aren't doing that too much anymore right now?
I think it depends on the writer, but I haven't noticed that they have, no. I can think of, I didn't read it, but there was a comic called Powers. Who did that? Brian Bendis, I think, did Powers. I think the main character of that couldn't remember his past, I think. But yeah, I don't think it's that common, actually.
Powers was more notable for its fusion of superhero stories and police procedural drama. So
yeah, I read a little bit of it. I'm not a Bendis fan at all, but
not even Daredevil. Oh, okay.
No. I mean, everything I've ever read about, I've read the Bendis stories that I've read, and I've liked none of them. So I don't think I've ever read a Bendis story I could say, boy, that was well written. That's never happened. Quite the opposite.
Ties in with that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I guess, hey?
You know, I mean, if it were me, I would, if it were me and I was an editor, I would not write a check for the, I'm amazed he earns a living. I'm amazed he earns a living as a professional writer when clearly you can't do the job, but he does. So I guess I'm the one who's wrong here. To me, being a professional writer indicates you should do a certain number of things. Things like plot, dialogue, coming to a conclusion.
Who was
he does
this?
none of those things correctly.
Who are you referring to?
He should not be earning a living, yet he does. So I'm the one wrong, I guess.
Did you try with the old Ultimate Spider-Man run?
No.
That was the one that everyone remembers.
So who's the author you're referring to?
Michael Bendis.
It's a guy by the name of Brian Bendis, who's a very popular writer. He's a very popular comics writer. I've read a number of his comics, and I just think he's incompetent. I just think he's an incompetent writer. And if I were an editor, I would say, I'm not going to buy this script. This is obviously written by someone who doesn't know what he's doing as a writer.
I kind of felt that way after I had read Greg Pak's Planet Hawk and World War Hawk, and I pretty well enjoyed those because in a way it kind of reminded me of the old Masters of the Universe. And then it's like when Jeff Loeb took over, for me personally, the complete difference in writing styles going from this intergalactic space adventure to Hawk Smash all over again, I was just like, I don't see how this happened. I think this writing is absolutely horrible. and of course, that's the people often tell me, well, that's the problem of being a comic book writer. Yeah, you're reading Planet Hawk and World War Hawk, and you're like, yeah, this is great. This is really, they're doing a lot with the Hawk. And then all of a sudden, it's right back to Hawk Smash. And I'm like, oh, this is...
You never expect consistency with Marvel or DC because the next writer is just going to do something completely different than the last one did. And the next one after will do something different. So there's never going to be consistency.
You said Brian Bendis?
B-E-N.
Bendis, right.
D-I-S.
Is that kind of calling Vin Diesel an actor? There's lots of opinions out there on that one too.
Well, he does say I am Groot pretty well.
That's true. Strangely enough, I haven't come across many Vin Diesel movies I don't like, so I don't know if that says something about him as an actor or me and my movie tastes.
I think it's sort of one of those situations where they know how to work around Vin Diesel to still make a good movie.
That's right. It's all about the angles and the one-liners and the background cinematography, right? He's not the show. They just understand how to work his character. Very good point.
Yeah, well, okay, then Slaughterhouse 5 next week. If anybody wants that. I've been looking forward to reading it. I'm actually halfway through already.
Okay, swing us a copy.
As usual, yes. If you need the CBR, I will send it to everyone, as usual. Yes.
That would be helpful for me. Is it a novel or a comic? I don't know much about Slaughterhouse 5, to be honest.
Kurt Vonnegut.
Kurt Vonnegut.
It's not a
Okay.
And it combines science fiction, autobiographical elements, and it's basically a mix of sci-fi and autobiography.
Cool. All right. It sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, if you don't get it from me, message me, ask me for the CBR, and I will send it to you.
I might do a quick online search. I might be able to get a free PDF too, but I'll definitely let you know.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can find it. You'll find it. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome.
Oh, yeah, it's out there. You'll find it.
Check to see if your public libraries have Hoopla. Because if they have Hoopla, a lot of times the comics are on there.
Oh, excellent. Okay, perfect.
I bet it would be on Hoopla. I know Hoopla's on the Toronto Public Library, Rob. I know that. So.
Of course, I don't know where everyone's from. So it's like, Hoopla's kind of big in Illinois right now. I don't know about everywhere else.
We have 2 Canadians, we have 2 Australians, and I think 3 Americans. That's what we got.
Where is everyone from? I'm from Calgary, Alberta.
We got 2 Canadians. We've got 2 Australians.
Wow.
Northwest Illinois, right over by Lake Michigan in America.
Oh, man, that sounds beautiful.
I'm living in Philadelphia.
Wow.
California. So there you go.
Holy smokes. Is that ever cool?
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. We got 3 countries here represented.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to make...
Marvel Comics' biggest name just left for DC.
That happened, yeah.
So this guy reckons a bit crap.
What's his
I
name?
think so.
There's
a parody. Maybe I'll find that. Maybe I'll find that because this tells you everything you need to know if I can find it.
So in the modern world, you don't need any talents anymore. You just have to play your politics correctly.
Who left for DC?
Brian Bendis.
Oh, I see.
So it seems as at Marvel, and he went to DC. So story-wise, you think he's a bit right? So he doesn't do the illustrations.
No, he doesn't.
All right. Some of the illustrations of the comics look good.
He's mostly just known for like writing stuff that sounds like crime TV shows.
Here. Let me show you. This is not Brian Bendis, but this is in fact a parody of Brian Bendis. It's not gonna do it. Gosh darn it. Okay. This is a parody. Have you ever heard of Bendis? Bendis, the writer. Bendis. I don't know any Bendis. He's a comic book writer. I have a real problem with. A comic book writer? As in, he writes what? Comics? That's his job. That's a job? Yes. Hang on, a real job? Yes. People get paid to write comics? Yes. With money. Real money. What other kind of money is there? That's bullshit. It's not. They pay people to write comic books. They do. Crazy. I know. My problem with him is that he always repeats himself. Repeats himself? Yes. Like his characters are always sitting. Sitting? Yes. Like on chairs? Yeah, sitting. Like they're not standing up. They never stand up? No, they do stand up, but most of the time they sit. Why is that a problem? The problem is not that they sit. It's what they do when they sit. What do they do when they sit? Well, they talk. They talk? They talk. Like they use words. They do. They use words. Too many. Too many. Too many words. And they always repeat them. Repeat them? Yes. They repeat the words. Yes.
This is like your mental disease of this word disorder you're talking about a couple of days ago.
No, but see, that's a parody. That he didn't write that. That's a parody. But I think that's actually very, very accurate of the experience of reading a Brian Bendis comic. That's the experience. That's a very accurate parody, actually, and it's very funny.
So he leaves nothing to an encyclopedia of knowledge about the world. In fact, it's a writing style that suggests nobody knows anything about the world except the very immediate. They wouldn't get any biblical references or any other set of references, which was the all-time thing of the ancient Meister singers and the skalds of olden times is full of references to other things, metaphors and similar.
Yeah. It's kind of like the thing with Quentin Tarantino tries to do with Pulp Fiction, where just this, they're talking about, McDonald's and everything.
Well, I mean, the Tarantino influence is very intentional in Bendis, I think.
Yeah, but I wouldn't write a check to him and buy his scripts.
To each his own.
I know he's very popular, and he certainly is making a living. So I'm the one wrong, I guess.
Natalia had a plan to show her illustrations at some point.
Good for you, Natalia.
Hang on.
Good for you.
Yeah, I could, but I'm not finished with it yet. It still looks really wonderful.
So you're going to make excuses?
No, I'm not. I'm just gonna. Oh, whatever.
So we suggested Natalia work on her own sort of comic sequences. She sort of studies drawing and art. So
yeah.
work on your own comic and see where you can go, which means a lot of hard work for only a frugal return, and then you have to improve on it.
Just keep at it, Natalia. You'll get there.
Hang on, I'm just gonna. If you don't mind, I can sort of just.
Yeah, sure. If you want, just keep at it. You'll.
Oh, anything that's a labor of love is worthwhile. I mean, the exponential growth we get when we tap into something that we create and we enjoy. I mean, I'm desperately trying to find a hobby like that. So, to have one, I think is just an absolute blessing.
Right.
The last time I did a comic was I drew a sequence of adventures of my two pet cats in 1970, so 50 years ago. A sequence of adventures after learning strongly from Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge comics. So.
Carl Barks.
Carl Barker's the name, is it? Right.
I believe so. I've actually been trying to find those comics.
Well, according to David, you can get them all reproductions or online, or.
I mean, you can find them online, sure, if you want. Fantagraphics just put out a full collection of all the Carl Barks stuff. Although they did a bad job with the coloring.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
So, you want me to do that for you, Natalia?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, got it.
Yeah, sure. Is it showing?
Yeah, just keep at it. You get better with every drawing.
It's not showing yet.
Yeah, I don't.
It's not showing yet. Something's.
I thought I did it.
It's really messy. It's not a. We're fine. So I did it in Photoshop, and yeah, probably. Can you see it now?
No, I can't see him yet.
Really?
You have to click on screen share.
Oh, okay.
And it gives you the option of what you want to share. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man.
Oh, hey, all right.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just left to right as usual.
Yeah.
So these are just like the story sequences that I thought of. This is sort of like took place in a historical setting.
Sure.
I think back in the persecution of the pagans by the Christians.
Sure.
So these, I think these girls. So I'm thinking of, they have they believe in the pagan religion and they're undergoing this sort of period of persecution and.
All right.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So this is
Glad
like
you got started on this.
Huh? Sorry.
Oh wow.
I'm glad you got started on this.
Yeah.
Oh, you're getting some positive commentary here, so you're doing okay so far.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that really.
Yeah, looks good so far. Yeah, it does.
It's very anime inspired, so it's not
Of
at all
course.
like the comics that David was showing. Because I've always been inspired by Japanese graphic novels and manga.
Of course.
Yeah, it has a really cool anime feel, and I love the way that you're capturing the different emotions and expressions. It's very expressive.
Thank you.
I
Yes,
like how you really focus on the eyes and the
exactly.
face.
Well, we were which more specific time period were you thinking of?
Sorry?
Like which more?
Fifth century, around 5th century, she was thinking of the time when the Christians were taking over in the Roman Empire, the time of Hypatia and all that.
Ah, wow.
Yeah, probably somewhere near Byzantine.
There was still pagan groves near Byzantium until the end of the 6th century. I think the last of them were supposedly stamped out then.
Oh, you mean in the 5th century?
The 6th century was the last mention of pagan groves near Byzantium. So that was after Christianity was very heavily established, but there were still pagans worshipping near Constantinople. But the last of them was stamped out. But of course, in the 5th century, you still had pagans in the army and pagans living in the cities and so forth.
I just wonder if it was ever stamped out, or if maybe these things are still underground, different sort of cults or pseudo religions or styles of belief, because there's all these different things you hear about, I mean, I have no evidence of this, but I wonder if anything ever really disappears, or maybe it just morphs into something else.
Yeah, that's it.
One thing I really do think I need to point out, Natalia, you do need to keep in mind to make sure there's a lot of headroom for the eventual word balloons and captions.
Yeah.
I mean, don't crowd them. I mean, you have to think of word balloons as an element, a pictorial, visual element in the panel as much as anything else. So that you have to compose with room for the balloons and captions if there are any captions. Yeah, I just think it's going to be a little crowded when you eventually put the balloons on. The placement is going to have to overlap a lot of the heads. That's really has to be a consideration. So always remember that.
If I may ask, what influenced you to write on this story?
Well, I've been kind of, I really like studying history and just all these different religions that occurred back then, and it sort of just inspired me in, wanting to really be imagining myself in the shoes of these characters. So this is sort of the portrayal of how I'd imagine that, the kinds of, I guess, the burden that they had to go through during that period of time.
I'm trying to figure out why is she chained up.
Oh. I didn't really think of why, to be honest. I just sort of thought she's. Oh, I just sort of thought that she chained up there for quite a while, so she's been in that prison all along.
You could have her hanging on the wall. That'd be a bit more atmospheric, wouldn't it?
Hanging on a wall.
Well, that's
How do you mean, like a rope tied around
position for the chained prisoner, wasn't it? They only hung me the right side up yesterday. It's the forgotten prisoner in the Life of Brian.
Yeah. They did that in Disenchantment too. If you ever saw that.
No, I don't know Disenchantment.
I liked it. It was fun.
I suppose they could have chained her up as a form of punishment or torture.
No.
So
or potentially
if she displeased her prisoners, prison keepers in some way.
or waiting.
Roman soldier, is it? Underneath the thud, it looks like a Roman soldier.
Yeah, it's set in the sort of like the 5th century when the well, let's say in Eastern Rome, when more or less the empire looked like it was on its last legs.
Yeah, this is supposed to be there's a big fire here, but I'm not sure if it's really visible.
This looks more like a Western, though.
Webtoon.
A Western, like with
Western.
the carriages or the stagecoach. Looks like a stagecoach from a Western. And the town itself looks like a Western town, too. I mean, I've seen Pompeii. It doesn't look like Pompeii. It looks more like a Western.
You're doing something more in the area of Greece, right? Where the Byzantine Empire was? Well, the Byzantine Empire would say we are the Roman Empire, legally speaking. But you're over in Greece, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the buildings are not really I wouldn't call them inaccurate. The buildings of Roman towns in that period would have generally had that appearance.
I'm just randomly drawing it up.
The question would be there'd be certain structures in certain towns which would be more architecturally ornate, so it'd be specialised civic buildings, but they wouldn't be in all towns. So, where's the town? Where's the town supposed to be? And did you come up with an exact year?
No. There's still things that I haven't really taken into consideration. Or
Well, if it's in the Balkans, in the wrong years, you've got the Huns running around, which, if you ran across the Huns, you weren't going to be in too good a position after they're finished with you. So much of the Balkans was destroyed by the Hun raids from the 430s into the 440s. It was at around about 450 that the Eastern Empire recovered its financial strength enough to field armies to beat off the Huns, and that's when Attila decided to attack the West. But he'd already done a lot of damage to the Balkans anyway, so there wasn't so much to steal anymore.
Well, you never see any fairy tales or mythological stories out of the Balkans.
Oh, that's a curious way of looking at it, because obviously the Balkan peoples had a lot of stories that were drawn by more contemporary people, like Bram Stoker was one.
Yeah, the Turks killed all their aristocracy. There's no princesses. There's no princesses.
There's no princesses when the Turks are around.
Well, the Turks killed all their aristocracy over the centuries.
Their own aristocracy or everybody else's?
Oh, I'm talking about the Balkans.
Oh, okay. So the native aristocracy was gradually wiped out by the Turks.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this is set in the period way before the Turks.
Right.
So, you know, if you're in the 5th century, you got to dodge the Huns. If you're in the 6th century, you got to dodge the Avars.
Mm-hmm.
But the Huns were a lot more destructive.
Yeah, I was thinking of this woman probably, they came from a noble family and were just taken away, and she met this other girl who's not who's a commoner, and I guess like she's trying to
yeah, well, that's quite a distinct possibility. If you've got a noble pagan family, that their children are forcibly taken away to be reconditioned as Christians.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Therefore, they inherit the property, so they're now Christian upper class or whatever. Yeah, it's a feasible scenario.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. But I'm not sure what will happen to this girl who's not a noble.
Hopefully we have a bit of rape and murder.
What was that big word you threw out there? Dysphoria? Go in a dysphoric direction, I think.
Well, yeah, like she was a bit adamant to escape from the prison. It's like, she's screaming out, "It's impossible! I've been here for quite a while," and that sort of thing. And well, yeah, she in the end she got the resolve to help her escape, but they got separated, and the other became an upper class Christian, and the other will probably still be a pagan, but.
Also, these girls are supposed to be relatives, are they? Or
sorry,
are they relatives or just?
No, they're not relatives at all. They're completely different people. So this girl who was taken away from her mother, she's a noble, and she's going to be a Christian. That's what I was thinking. And this girl with the longer hair, she's might actually want her to just stay as a pagan, maybe.
This is sort of reminds me of Skyrim, like at the beginning of Skyrim, when you're running away from the dragon and the Roman says, "Come with me," and then there's the barbarian that says, "Come with me," and you have to decide which path you take.
Ah, right. Yeah, that I could. Yeah. So there's like a story that you could pick, I guess.
Well, yeah, keep at it, Natalia.
Oh, wait a minute. Natalia, have you read about King Arminius for the Germanic tribes?
Heard of that, but I've never read it.
Yeah, well, it's just an interesting story. Because, well, one, that's a true story where Arminius and his brother were sent, and they were kind of growing up in Augustus Caesar's court. And the one brother stays with the Roman military and becomes a high-ranking general, whereas Arminius went back he was supposed to roll over his Germanic tribal area, but instead he supported the people that were in his area and actually waged a war against the Romans. And his brother was on the other side as one of the Roman officers, where he was fighting with the Germanic tribe that he was with. And the interesting thing is that the area where they defeated the Roman army, there was a big battle there, is the same place where Siegfried slays the dragon in the Lied des Nibelungen.
Yeah, well, Siegfried normally they put with the Huns for some reason. So Siegfried's sort of a later phenomenon.
But some people consider, since Siegfried slays Fafnir in that same area, that actual battle influenced the creation of that tale.
Yeah, well, there's a big docudrama on YouTube, I think, on that incident, isn't there? It's about a 2-parter or a 2-hour docudrama, which is quite colourful.
Anyway, yeah, I was just thinking, Natalia, you might want to look into that story, especially since that's a true story that might influence the writing for the tale. I mean, ultimately, do whatever you want. It's your story. It comes from your mind. But I was just thinking that story, since you're going to do the 2 women that are in the cell, and then one goes to the aristocracy, the other one stays with what she was natively. That just might influence how you write it.
Yeah, sure. I'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
But ultimately, do whatever you want to do. It's your story.
Yeah, I still have a lot of things to consider really. And the looks of the buildings, especially because it looks a bit like a 19th century sort of English town rather than a Roman.
No, the buildings aren't that out of place. The common buildings of that period would often look like that. So no, I wouldn't smash the buildings just yet. But there's probably still some the research to be done there on what the public buildings would look like.
Yeah, I would know. Yeah, thanks for the feedback. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, keep at it. You'll get there.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing. It's always nice to see other people's art and interpretations and have discussions and get ideas. Art's something I can really appreciate. So very cool.
Yeah, well, you'll get an Eisner Award sooner or later, Natalia.
I hope so.
Right.
That's the documentary there.
Oh, Arminius.
It's a good story. It's a little bit, the production values are just slightly shonky. But it's a German production, which History Channel takes and redubs with English voices and that. You see, the Germans, there's a certain little subset of the Germans that like reveling in their barbarian past, you see. So it's sort of like getting in contact with your inner Nazi.
Oh. Yeah, okay.
Anyway, we've got another one to go to, haven't we? We've got to go and defy reason. David, this is your opportunity to come and annoy a rationalist.
Oh, yeah. I'll consider it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Anyway, but nice seeing you all. I'll catch you next time.
Yeah, Slaughterhouse 5 next time.
Yes. Thanks. Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Okay, nice. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. And after that, we've got a few other things. The Dreaming, maybe, and Undiscovered Country, which are both long. So, but anyway, I know no one's going to come here every week. I know that. But yeah. Thanks for being here, Victor. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay.
See you later.
Next time.